everyone, my name is Ashley Jones and I'm the event director at Marketing Showcase, and today I've got an exciting insight session for you. Now this one is a little bit meaty really, so I'm looking forward to speaking to Leona, who is an SEO consultant at Redico, and I'm going to let her introduce herself shortly. Just before we do, what is an insight session? So the idea of this one, apart from just basically helping me get better at marketing and learn something new, is to help you guys kind of get your heads around a new concept or something that might be new to you. So we're going to start off with this one. It's on Core Web Vitals. And for those of you that don't know anything about it, we're going to start nice and slow before we get into some meaty questions. So before I go on and waffle too much, I'd like to welcome Leona. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
Really well. For a Monday, I think I'm just about coping. Got over this weekend. I got a couple of rounds of golfing, which is always a
winning at life.
Exactly. But back at my desk today. So Leona, tell me a little bit about yourself.
I'm an SEO consultant at Redico. So I started in SEO about 6 years ago. Started as an executive at Redico, so doing more of the sort of manual, like data gathering type tasks. And my role now is predominantly delivering like strategy campaigns for clients. I'm predominantly based in sort of the insurance and travel industry, so the type of clients I work with, but there's like a real sort of variety at Redico, which is lovely. So we are a award-winning search agency. We're based in Kent, and our focus mostly is on all things SEO.
Brilliant. And what's your favorite type of SEO work? What have you been enjoying at the moment? What sort of campaigns have you been working on?
I love sort of putting together strategy. I think it's one of my favorite thing. So improving how our clients are appearing for their key terms across insurance has been what I've been working on quite a lot over the last year, and I really enjoy the technical side of things as well. So actually the Core Web Vitals stuff is really of interest to me, and working with our development team, trying to get like a better understanding of how we can improve client sites. But the tech stuff's definitely interesting. It's one of those things you never stop learning. There's so much to it.
Yeah, well, that's a lovely bridge to kind of get into our conversation here.
It is.
For a total newbie or a total blonde like myself, dumb it down for me. What is Core Web Vitals? What's it all about?
It is essentially bringing user experience as part of the Google algorithm update. So for some context, Google makes around sort of 200, there's around 200 ranking factors as part of Google's like core algorithm update. Those range across like everything you can imagine to do with websites, things like really technical stuff like indexation. And what this part of the update is, the Core Web Vitals, is really focused around user experience. So little, you might have experienced this before. Like an example for me is, have you ever clicked on a website before and then you've gone to click like a button and then the page is sort of shifted and then you can't click through to the next part? So that is
the button, right?
Exactly. It slides around, it's moved. So again, just to sort of break that down and sort of like, and that is part of what this update is looking at, what it's concerning. So we know like page speed has been a part of the algorithm update for years now. So that's something that all SEOs have sort of been working towards. We've been trying to reduce the time it takes to load your website. And we know that's part of Google's ranking factors. But this newest part of the update, so quite difficult at the moment. It was supposed to launch in May. It's actually been pushed back now. So phase rollout begins middle of June. So which is great news for those of us that are still working towards improving our sites for that. Got a little bit more time, which is always lovely. But this part of it specifically is just around user interactivity. Like I mentioned, that sort of skipping around the buttons, that's called cumulative layout shift. And then page loading times as well. So those are the sort of, the fundamentals there.
Why is it important for me, other businesses and marketers to pay attention to Core Web Vitals? What's going to be the penalty if I do nothing?
I suppose to sort of explain something quite lightly, they have said this isn't going to be like an overnight switch. It's not going to be the case that all of a sudden your website's going to disappear. But as Google sort of calls out and gives you like a prompt, it's like a notice from them to be like, hey, here's this thing we're going to be looking at now. It's just in your favor really to start working towards those things, because what they use these for are kind of like tiebreakers. If in your industry you've got two sites that are both very, very similar, and one of them performs better for the page experience things, they'll outrank you. So that's why you want to be considering it really.
Sure, cool. you touched upon it there, but how is it actually in practice going to affect search results? And you mentioned there, like, we're sort of delaying the time. When are we going to start seeing this come into play?
So we're looking at mid-June, and that was confirmed by Google. They put all their most important announcements on Twitter, and so keep a close eye on there. So yeah, the phase rollout begins middle of June, and we'd expect to see that take place over the next few months afterwards, like a full rollout. First, on launch, it's only going to be looking at mobile pages, so that's something to consider. But it is unknown. We don't know, as with all things at Google, until it sort of happens, we don't know the full impact. But I sort of alluded to this earlier. It's what they've kind of put out there is that it's going to be a tiebreaker, and it's going to help them make decisions if two websites were very similar. But the impact on search results themselves will be incremental over time. So as the update's fully rolled out, then we'll sort of measure the full impact of the change.
Brilliant. And set me a to-do list. What can I do as a business to prepare, Leona?
This is a very big question, one of the meatier ones. What can you do to prepare? I'd suggest the first thing really would be making sure that your site renders, that you can use your site without JavaScript. So that's probably one of the biggest issues we come across at Redicobi sites that kind of come on board and their site just doesn't work without JavaScript. And we know that Google, as much as it's improved and it's got better at crawling JavaScript, still not fully there yet. So making sure that your site's, really just as useful and that it's just as user-friendly without it would be the number one thing. And then probably just making sure that what's going on behind the scenes, again, this bit more techie, but looking at things like databases, caching things as much as possible, just so that every time a user hits your site, it's not having to reload everything.
And I did a little bit of preparation for this call, which is actually, that's not very like me, but
done your homework.
I've done my homework, exactly. I've watched a video or two. And one of the statements that I saw was, if you've got a fairly decent website that's managed well and it's looked after and everything's in order, that this maybe isn't going to have such a big impact. Do you think that statement rings true? You're doing things right already, or does everyone need to really get on board with this and make changes?
I think for the most part, we actually have a tool called SERP Speed. So from all of that data we've gathered, the majority of sites are failing, like Core Web Vitals. There's like a pass or fail metric. So I'd say, like, across the board, in general, probably everyone's got things that they can do to improve their site.
Right.
But that being said, if this is something you're sort of continuously working towards, improving page speed, looking after your user experience as much as you can, I think, for the most part, it's not like you've got to suddenly, you shouldn't have to change your strategy, because this all should have been part of it, really. If this has been like a bit of a mic drop, oh my God, what do I do now moment, then I'd probably start working on it as soon as possible.
And leads me nicely to my next question. So for those businesses that are failing that, I will put the link somewhere so people can go and use that tool. But for businesses that are failing those tests, what do they need help on, and how can an agency perhaps help? How do you go about kind of speaking to an agency and getting them involved, and how will they be able to help?
Cool, thank you. So I would suggest probably the biggest area here of difference is that a lot of the tools that are available, like Lighthouse, for example, so Google's tool around page speed, they basically, you put your website in and they'll run a report. So they'll give you just a load of actions. It'll be like, here's everything that's wrong with your site. I think for most people, most website owners, you're going to be looking at a list and you wouldn't really know where to start. So you could start working on something that's going to take you days and days of development time, thousands of pounds. That might not even be what makes the biggest difference. And I think that's where, like, an industry expert agency is going to help the most, because we can give you like a priorities list of things to work on based on what's going to actually make the biggest impact. Because sometimes there are, like, images, for example, things like that, they can be like the biggest problem for a site, and it can be, I mean, it takes time, but it can be like an easier thing to fix. But you wouldn't know that. Like I said, you'd be getting just a sort of preset, here's issue action, here's what's wrong, but you wouldn't have a steer on kind of where to start, how long those things should take as well.
Okay. And a little bit more info on the tool. So it was, and I'm going to say, am I saying this right? SERP Speed.
SERP Speed,
sound
indeed.
Like an absolute, donut on this, where I'm saying it wrong. But
you got it right.
What's it all about? Give me a little bit of it could be a plug for SERP.
A plug. Here we go. Let me do my best here. So SERP Speed is, I mentioned Lighthouse earlier, so that's Page Speed Insights, one of Google's tools that they developed. So if you think of SERP Speed as like Lighthouse on steroids, what it does is gathers all the same information as Lighthouse does, but because you input a keyword, so for example, you might put in like marketing agency, whatever it is you're kind of going after, it will then scan all the top 10 Google rankings for that keyword as well and pull out the same insight. So then what you've got then is a view at the way that Google will also be comparing your site versus competitors in the top 10. You get scores for all of those. You get the insights as well around like the actions, what could be wrong. And you get an idea, like I said, you might fail the core web vitals, which as I alluded to, like a lot of sites are in general, just across all industries. But for your industry in particular, it could be that the average score is like 40 out of 100 and your site might be scoring 50, in which case you're in quite a good position. So you might be best spend putting time elsewhere. And again, just to like reiterate kind of a few of the other things I mentioned earlier around like Google themselves. So Danny Sullivan's one of the people that actually works at Google. So he's their public search liaison. And I've just got a couple of like quotes from him. So he said it's a new thing to keep in mind and it remains one of many things. And I think that's kind of the most important thing here. If you use SERP Speed, you can get that snapshot overview of how your site's currently performing against competitors. And that's what you want to know. But it doesn't mean that nothing else you're doing is important. So you can still, like I said, keep driving your strategy, keep doing what you would be doing anyway. But just it's something that you need to bear in mind for future, just so you're not left behind, really.
Sure, that's a really nice conclusion, I'd say. Thank you for taking the time to go through that with me. I'm going to sign off with links to Redico. I'll link the SERP Speed tool.
Where's the link going?
Somewhere there. If we cover off all angles with it's almost
but
like a
somewhere
dance.
It's here.
The weekend dance, the Monday dance. So yeah, no, we'll pop the link somewhere for sure. And I just want to, Leona, just say thank you so much for taking the time to join me and take me through that.
Thanks for having me.
No, I certainly learned a lot, and I'm sure people that are watching this found that very handy. So I look forward to speaking to you soon.
Thanks so much. Speak soon.